Well, welcome back to the Hortman Show. Fall is slowly rolling in. It doesn't seem like it. We've had a relatively dry, hot end of the summer season, and with it comes the vagaries of that heat. And I brought in a couple samples that I've located. Actually, I'd love to start with what I call Weed of the Week. And I have two weeds of the week. One I've started to see more and more often in woodlands, and this plant is it's actually a shrub, and it grows quite well in relatively dense shade in the understory of woodlands. It was brought in as an ornamental plant. It's called jet bead, and it gets the name jet bead from these black berries that form at the end of the summer. And this is probably the curse of this plant, is this berry is really just a seed case, and birds eat it and carry it off and reseed an area. The bush will get about 4 to 5 foot tall. I've seen it in scattered woodlands, and when it gets into the woodlands, it will create very large, dense patches. No understory plants grow in there, meaning perennials. And it tends to also inhibit tree germination. So if you have beech trees or oak trees or anything that puts out seeds, those seedlings will not come up through this, this shrub layer. So if you have it on your property as an ornamental plant, I would encourage you to pull it out. There's so many great replacements out there, and it is a plant, and there's plenty of other plants that would fit the bill for this. A word of warning, make sure you know what plant you're pulling out. Some people will confuse what's called arrowwood viburnum, that's a native viburnum, with this plant, because it tends to have a serrated leaf like this, but it's not as serrated. This is called doubly serrated. If you look at the edge of the foliage, the leaf edge, you'll see that there's 2 different length leaf points, whereas arrowwood viburnum has a pretty uniform edge or pattern on the edge of it. In the spring, you'll see this blooming. It has kind of a large, I think it's a 4-petaled white flower, and it's very attractive. But in the long run, this thing is a curse. It's a weed. The other weed that I'm finding lots of just recently, and I know it's a problem out in the Midwest, is, and it's a sticky, abrasive plant. For those of you that are beer lovers, this is hops, but it's not the hops that you can grow for the hop cones that you can then infuse in beers. It doesn't, the cone, there's a couple cones on here at the end, and you can see they're kind of puny, small little seed cases. Has a very sticky, it truly is prickly hairs that cling and grab onto you. You can feel it as you walk through this stuff. But this is a Japanese hops. I think it was introduced as an ornamental plant and also for herbal concoctions, but now it's a weed. It's in big patches in the Midwest. This likes open ground, whereas the jet bead bush likes to have shade, or grows well in shade. This really likes open ground, especially moist areas. It's an annual, but it will reseed vigorously, and annuals are plants that only live 1 year. Unfortunately, with this, it produces seed, and for an annual plant, you think, boy, that can't grow much in 1 year. This one vine can get 35 foot long, so if you have many seedlings out there, it can really stretch out and gobble up some real estate. Again, like many invasive species, it tends to ramble up and smother things, in many invasive vining species. So that's the big problem with this, is even though it dies off every spring, because of the way it covers all sorts of vegetation, it will inhibit sunlight getting to those desirable plants, and eventually you'll end up with a monoculture of just this one plant. So Japanese hops, be on the lookout. It has a 5-petaled, it's a 5-petaled leaf. Somebody told me they thought it looked like marijuana. To me, it really doesn't look like it, but the real giveaway is this very fine, stout hairs or little thorns. I'm not real sure what botanists would classify it as. And if you try to rub your hand up the vine toward the end, the terminal end, you won't make it too far. It's a very clingy vine. Lots of tree problems showing up. I've got I got one, a lot of people have been calling about their trees, leaves looking funny. When the heat goes up, people go inside and turn on the air conditioning. And now that it's starting to cool off, people are coming outside and they're looking at plants and trees and whatever and saying, oh my God, what's wrong with this? This is a classic symptom that shows up on pin oaks, and this is a willow oak. When the soil typically isn't acidic enough, this plant then has a difficult time getting nutrients. And one of the first things you see is a yellowing of the leaves with a green center vein. These veins are actually not real dark green anymore. So it's the end of the season. This plant's probably more than happy to give up its leaves and basically fold its cards for the season. Ideally, what I'll tell people is go out and test the soil around the plant. Unfortunately, I think we tend to overplant things like pin oak and willow oak in areas. They're very good trees and they do well, but we plant them in what I consider marginal areas for this type of plant. They do like to have acidic soils, and I'll see these on roadsides and in median strips, and some will be fine, but others will be this chartreusey green, which isn't healthy. It means that this thing's having a bit of a fight. So if you have questions about your willow oak before you or pin oak getting yellow leaves, I would do a soil test and see if the pH is low enough. Ideally, it probably likes something down at 5.5 or lower. Well, this is a coastal species also, but it does okay up here provided it gets acidic soil. The other thing I've been seeing, and I have a picture up on the screen, is people have been complaining about their tilia, or I can't remember the common name, but it will come to me later. It's a very common tree with heart-shaped leaf. And as you can see, the leaves are very tattered, and usually the first thing people see when they look outside at linden, that's the common name, when they look outside at their linden, they'll see the overall appearance of the tree is kind of brown and tattered. And I usually tell people, hey, look closely at the leaves, and sure enough, they'll report back that the leaves have this tattered, eaten out appearance, and that's from Japanese beetles. And we haven't had Japanese beetles all over the county, but their populations overall are higher, and there are some hot pockets, and where there's been lots of Japanese beetles, they came out primarily in January or July. Lots of the tilia or the linden trees have very tattered looking leaves. Japanese beetles tend to be what I call skeletonizers, meaning that when they eat the leaf, and you can see it from the picture, it will only eat the tissue between the veins, and it's a neat looking effect if you like that look, because you have this perfect skeleton on many of the leaves of just the vein pattern. The other thing that came across my desk, and I love these things. I encourage people to bring me in their dead plants. I guess it's a sickness for me, but I got back into the office one day after giving a talk, and this showed up on my desk, and it's a PJM rhododendron. It's a dwarf form of one of the PJMs, and it's a common landscape rhododendron, and the note on it said, what can I spray on it? And at this point, really, where can you bury it? It's dead. And I called the homeowner up and asked them a couple questions. And one of the first ones was, I said, how did you plant it? And they said, oh, we dug the hole, we mixed in a little compost, and we tried to spread the roots out. And as you can see, when I look at the base of this plant, I actually took a short video, and we'll try and loop that in here. This plant never had its roots spread out. It's a solid root mass that's just a reflection of the pot that it was in. And I actually took a hose with a strong spray that I videoed, sprayed it directly onto the root mass, and very little soil came out. This thing probably had been in the pot way too long. And if you're familiar with anything in the ericaceous family, blueberries, rhododendrons, azaleas, they have a very fine root system, and you can see these fine root hairs, but their root system prefers to spread out along the surface of the ground. It's not a deep-rooted plant. And these roots in the pot, they went for close to the surface. In a pot, the surface is around the edge and going down. This should have been torn apart quite a bit. They should have passed on it because it has such a dense root mass. My guess is it just got stuck in the ground without any disturbance, and the soil, and again, this is a guess, was probably a bit too dense. You can see none of the roots ventured out of this root ball. So it really didn't have a chance to establish. If it went through a dry period or too much moisture, either one would have contributed to its demise. So again, make sure you have the right growing conditions and you understand what these plants need in order to root in well. And I think that's all for the week. Please send me your plants. I appreciate the plant samples. If you have questions, you can email me at hortman@umd.edu. Follow us on social media. You probably can't see me, or like us on social media. Follow us on Facebook, or what are we? We'll have to reshoot that. What is it? It's follow us. Oh, subscribe.
On YouTube, follow us on social media.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so thanks again. Subscribe on YouTube or follow us on social media. Until next week.
All right,
cool.
there we go.
Made it through.